Now, our lecture series aims at primarily tracing the changes, political and diplomatic, between India and a few. When I use the term key out here, I actually refer to those nations which are strategic interests. So we chose upon three nations. That's China, Nepal, and we chose USA. Now, the first lecture that was on India-China relationship that was held on the 30th of June. And we had with us noted academician, Dr. Rajkumar Kothari, to explain the details of the India-China changing dynamics. Today is our second session, our second lecture, and this we will be doing on India-Nepal changing dynamics over the past couple of weeks. Now, the two neighbors, India and Nepal, have traditionally shared a very unique relationship of friendship and cooperation, which was characterized by open borders and a people-to-people contact at the level of kinship and culture. Now, this relationship has all of a sudden gone for a toss and has started worsening over the past couple of weeks. The immediate provocation at present is the territorial dispute over the Kala Pani issue. Now, what is Kala Pani? The Kala Pani is a patch of land near the India-Nepal border, which is close to the Lipulekh Pass on the India-China border. This also is a very important trade route, and it also falls on the route on the Kailash Manasarovar Yatra in Tibet. Recently, the Nepal House of Representatives also passed or endorsed, I would say, endorsed a new political map of the country. And in this new political map, three strategic areas of India, which India claims to be as its own, were included. And these three strategic areas were Kalapani, Lipulekh, and Limpiadura. Now, immediately India registered a border dispute against Nepal. And since then, the situation on the ground has been constantly worsening. The latest setback has been when the Prime Minister of Nepal, KP Sharma Oli, claimed on 4th July that the Indian government has been conspiring to destabilize the Nepalese government and to oust him from power. Now, it is with the intention of tracing these equations, these changing dynamics that we have gathered here today. And we have with us our renowned academician, Dr. Piyu Ghosh, who is also an expert on South Asian matters. Dr. Piyu Ghosh is Associate Professor, Lady Brabourne College, and she will be explaining to us the nuances of the India-Nepalese relationship over the years and the recent trends. However, before we begin with Dr. Ghosh's session today, I would like to request the principals of the two collaborating colleges to say a few words to bolster the spirit of this online lecture series. I would first request Dr. Joydeep Sharongi, Principal, New Alipur College, to say a few words. Dr. Sharongi, sir.
Good evening, HOD, Dr. Madhu Parnagar. And actually, the HOD is about the political science departments of both the collaborating colleges. Honorable Principal, Professor Sana is here. Kishore Bharati Bhogini Nivedita College for assistance, support, and mutual learning for each other. And this move is giving fruits and flowers these days. Thank you, Dr. Piyu Ghosh, for agreeing to give a talk on a very pertinent issue, because this is the time that we should reevaluate and to know the bilateral relationships, the political agenda, the political aptitudes of the countries, because we should know our neighbors first, then we should know others. And I really thank the Department of Political Science of both the colleges for coming out with this lecture series with very three important strategic nations from India. For India, one is China, already done, and now Nepal, and then US. And Indo-Nepal peace treaty goes back to 1950, and it talks about the transiting trade, tourism, education opportunities of both the countries, and different other areas of interest. But recently, in May 2020, Government of India has inaugurated a link road from Kailash to Manusarovar, and that has created a lot of dispute in the area. But it has, the relationship between Nepal and India is very promising, and it gives fruits in many ways. The trans-border bus service.
Sir, please unmute yourself, sir.
The trans-border bus service between New Delhi to Kathmandu was an important factor of bilateral relationships. And also, the head of the Department of Political Science, New Alipur College, has rightly stressed the importance of Kali River and Kalapani, the bordering areas. But we are looking forward to Dr. Piyush Ghosh's talk, which will enlighten us and all the participants of this webinar. And the number is 134. It is an index of popularity of the topic, popularity of the speaker, and the dynamism of the political science departments of both the collaborating institutions. It's a pride, privilege for me that political science department has always been the mitochondria or the powerhouse of the college, and it is going to make a catalytic influence on other colleagues. Thank you, Principal Sir Kishore Bharati, Bhogini Nivedita College. Thank you, Dr. Piyush Ghosh, for agreeing for delivering the talk. And thank you, everybody. I wish best of luck for today's talk. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Such kind words, sir, and such praises. It was really nice to hear for your encouragement, for your cooperation. Now I would request Dr. Shiv Shankar Sana, Principal, KBPN College, to say a few words to start the occasion.
Good evening, everybody. Honorable Speaker Dr. Piyush Ghosh, Associate Professor of Political Science of Lady Brabham College, Honorable Principal Dr. Joydeep Sarangi, New Alipur College, and two heads of two departments of Political Science of New Alipur College and Kishore Bharati, Bhogini Nivedita College. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me immense pleasure in welcoming all of you to the second day lecture of a series of lectures organized by Department of Political Science, New Alipur College, in collaboration with Political Science of Kishore Bharati, Bhogini Nivedita College. Now we know we are going through two pandemic situations among other hazards in the world. The first one is COVID-19, which has mass destructed global health, human lives, and socio-economic structure of India as well as the world economy. And second one is our neighborhood countries' aggressive attitudes of acquisition of borderland of India, mainly China, and this topic was discussed earlier 30th June successfully, and today's topic is Nepal and India relations. The title of this topic is India's Changing Equations During Pandemic Times. The Nepal also occupied some borderland of India, and this is problematic to us. Although an Indo-Nepal joint field survey team has started work for an amicable resolution to land border dispute. So hope today's topic is pertinent and more relevant, from which we can enlighten or enrich our knowledge in the applied field of our real life. I hope this webinar will achieve a grand success. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Sana. Thank you for your encouragement and best wishes. Now, I'm very happy to say that we have with us today our very own Vice Principal, sir, Professor Dibesh Bera. We would like Professor Bera to say a few words on this topic before we begin with the session today. Professor Bera, sir.
Greetings to our resource person, Dr. Piyush Ghosh, our principal, Dr. Joydeep Sarangi, and Professor Shiv Shankar Sana, Kishore Bharati, Bhogini Nivedita College, and participants. Today's topics: India-Nepal relationship. Nepal is a landlocked country and a buffer state between two rival India and China. Also, Nepal strategically important country for India. It shares a long boundary of about 1100 kilometers with 5 Indian states: Uttarakhand, UP, Bihar, West Bengal, and Sikkim. To understand India-Nepal relation, we need to go back a couple of centuries before. In 1814, the British East India Company and Nepal Kingdom involved in a fierce battle. Nepal lost Sikkim in east and Garhwal and Kumaon in the west. And the Treaty of Subuli got ratified in year 1860. In 1950, Rana dynasty ruler Shamsher Rana Jung Bahadur was scrapped by losing his territory and thrown to China, as Tibet was almost captured by the China. In 1950, Nepal and India signed a bilateral treaty of peace and establishing a strategic relationship between two South Asian neighbors. Rana dynasty ended after 3 months of signing treaty. Treaty allows free movement of people and goods between two nations and a close relationship and collaboration on matters of defense and foreign policy. Both countries came to close due to China. But many geopolitical analysts of India had an opinion that treaty was one-sided and all the privilege would be enjoyed by the Nepal. Because Nepal is a landlocked country, it depends upon India for its needs, including oil, gas, grain, medicine, defense. Therefore, two routes were identified for smooth supply. One Kolkata port through West Bengal, another UP. Nepalese law does not permit open border. By treaty, India cannot buy land and property in Nepal and carry out business in their name. But Nepalese can purchase land, do business, and even allowed to join government job with some exclusion. In early 60s, large number of Indians settled in Nepal as citizenship rule were easy those days. In 1975, Sikkim was merged with India. The Kingdom of Sikkim proposed Nepal to be recognized as a zone of peace where military competition would be off limit. Pakistan and China support, but India strongly opposed. The relationship worsened in 1988 for single trade transit and relation destroying change from
স্যার মিউট হয়ে গেছেন।
স্যার আপনি মিউট হয়ে গেছেন।
স্যার আনমিউট করুন।
হ্যাঁ করেছেন
স্যার আনমিউট করুন।
blockage ended on 1990. VP Singh signed a treaty with Nepal PM Krishna Prasad Bhattarai. Now we know the assassination of 2001, assassination in a royal family. Thereafter, on May 2008, the newly elected Constitutional Assembly declared Nepal the Federal Democratic Republic, abolishing 240 years of monarchy. 2008 to 2010, Prachanda, the Prime Minister of Nepal, he ruled the country and he also the chairperson of Nepal Communist Party. After 17 long years, 2014, Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Nepal. As Lipulekh was the tri-junction of India, China, and Nepal. But China never demanded Lipulekh as its territory, but Nepal always claimed after signing a trade treaty between India and China in 2015. And thereafter we know various news in our newspaper and TV. Now Dr. Ghosh will discuss the present relation between Nepal and India. Lecture will be enriched from Dr. Ghosh. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Hello. Thank you, sir. Thank you for providing us with such interesting information. Now, without much ado, we will now hand over the platform to Dr. Piyush Ghosh. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
We will
Yes.
now hand over the platform to
Hello, yes.
Dr. Piyush Ghosh, whose lecture we are all waiting to hear. Just before I request Dr. Piyush Ghosh to begin, I have a small request for all the participants. Hello. I would request all the participants to keep themselves muted during the course of the lecture. Please keep yourselves muted. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat box. At the end of the session, at the end of the lecture, there would be an interactive session and your questions will be posed to the speaker. Please do mute yourselves while the lecture is going on. A small request, and just one more thing, that is there would be a feedback link which would be provided at the end of the lecture. Please keep a tab on that. Thank you. Now over to Dr. You are
Just before that, I would like to request Kishore Lal sir, please mute yourself, please, sir. Mr. Kishore Lal sir. Kishore Kal sir. Kishore Kal sir, please mute yourself.
I would request Admin Paul Science to do it then.
Actually, I'm muting Kishore Kal sir,
yeah, please,
but he is
Dr.
repeatedly
Pugh
unmuting yourself. Yeah. Okay, Dr. Pugh Ghosh, please over to you.
Thank you very much. Good evening. We are meeting amidst a pandemic, and as we have been challenged, the entire human civilization is being challenged by the pandemic. On one hand, it is a very sad reality that our country's security is also being challenged, and we lost 20 lives of our soldiers, our martyrs, in a skirmish between the Chinese forces and the Indian forces. So on one hand, we are kind of battling an invisible enemy, the coronavirus, the COVID-19. And on the other hand, it is very, I don't know how pessimist a political regime can be. Instead of fighting the COVID or the coronavirus, they are fighting out their neighbors and also trying an expansionist policy all around South Asia, Southeast Asia, South China Sea, and Asia Pacific. So we have, my approach to India, Nepal would be very different, because we have come, the earlier speakers, they have made clear about the cooperation that we have with Nepal. But I would just approach it from the internal and the external structural pattern in which internal politics and international politics, they work, and it is a kind of the malfunctioning of internal politics sometimes, and the excessive functioning of the international politics at sometimes, which really creates kind of existential issues for countries and also for the human civilization. So when I start my presentation, I would like to show you the map where we can look at. Can you see the map? Madhuparna, can you see it? Madhuparna?
Yes, 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 it's visible.
Okay, just give, whenever you can't see, just tell me, okay? So we have to look at the geostrategic location of Nepal. It is located between two giant neighbors, India and China. And we have to also take into account that it is a landlocked country. Not only its geostrategic position is important to India, but the political stability of the country called Nepal is also very important to India. Until and unless we have a strong democratic Nepal, a stable Nepal, it will not be possible for India to thought of aversive designs by China. So this geostrategic position of Nepal is very important to India as well as to Nepal. In order to kind of preempt or kind of content or kind of play the game of international politics with China. So my approach to the Indo-Nepal relationship would be kind of different thing. We will look at India and China and place Nepal right in the center, because Nepal serves as a buffer state between these two. And from the definition of the buffer state, we know that it is that even if it is a small state, it kinds of act as a pincushion, and it helps in avoiding any major kind of aggressive behavior on the parts of the two neighbors. So this buffer status of Nepal is very important to India, and India always tries to preserve the buffer status of Nepal, because as we all know that Tibet has lost its buffer status when in 1950s it was annexed by China. And I must tell you why such problem between China, Nepal, China, Bhutan, China, Arunachal Pradesh, China, Sikkim and also China, Tibet is a long kind of thinking in Chinese strategic mind about treating these 5 states as five fingers of the palm. 5 fingers of the palm being China. They believe that these states, they belong to China and they must take it back into their own territory. So they have done this with Tibet, and they have similar kind of visions for Nepal, for Bhutan, for Arunachal Pradesh, for Sikkim, and that's why you find incursions into the Indian territory of Arunachal Pradesh often. And now you're finding from 2019, we had Chinese activity and we had the Doklam standoff, and now you have another activity in Nepal as well as in Ladakh, in the Galwan sector and the finger areas in those sectors. So you have to look into India-Nepal relations in perspective in the context of the existence of our huge neighbor that we classify as China. We cannot just look into the cooperation aspect of it, because the cooperation is also conditioned by the existential issue because of the threat of China. So Nepal has to do a tightrope balancing between these two neighbors, two big neighbors. It is a very tough task, but it is also to the advantage of Nepal that it can play one big neighbor against the other, and it has been doing this for many years, and it is also continuing to do this. But there are certain strategic difficulties why Nepal cannot go directly into the sphere of influence of China, and why it cannot easily come out of the Indian influence. But the most important thing is that given the externalities, now look at the internalities. The internalities of Nepali politics very much determines which side Nepal will tilt. Whether it will tilt towards India, whether it will tilt towards China. But in the Nepali politics, in the midst coming towards one thing was missing right from 1950, when we had the end of the autocratic Rana rule. We have, and right today, one thing is missing from the Nepali politics, that is stability. India has been striving to ensure that democracy and stability in Nepal exist, because a stable Nepal will work as a bulwark against Chinese expansionism. And China wants Nepal to be into its fold so that maybe directly it would not consume or subsume Nepal, but once Nepal is in its sphere of influence, it will be very easy for Nepal to reach out to the territory of India, because we know already China has constructed motorable roads in Nepal, and any movement, China can come near, almost near Bagdogra. So here one is an external factors which conditions Indo-Nepal relationship, external factor being China, and the internal political instability, which also is kind of gives India sometimes nerve shocks, and sometimes India reacts to the nerve shocks in such a way that Nepal's life blood is choked. And I will give you a few examples of that. We know that Nepal is a landlocked country and it has trade and transit treaty with India apart from the 1950 Treaty of Peace and Perpetual Friendship. Now, this trade and transit treaty in 1970s, it kind of created a problem. The reign was of King Mahendra. India wanted a single treaty of trade and transit. Nepal wanted a different trade treaty and different transit treaty. Matters came to a head, and we have a kind of total kind of between the two neighbors, a kind of standoff, and India immediately, whenever there is a problem with Nepal, it stops its border, and Nepal's trade and transit is totally cut off, and it becomes deplorable for Nepal and the Nepalese people to survive without the supplies from India, and also from their export through the corridors, trade corridors from India. So the matters came into such a high point that what happened is that the two governments, they sat together, they tried to reach out an amicable solution, but the treaty lapsed. I think it was only during VP Singh's rule that again, that in 1989, that a separate trade and transit treaty was worked out, and the matters were solved and put to rest for the time being. But again, this kind of blockade resulted in 2015 with the Madhesi problem, with the adoption of the new constitution of Nepal in 2015. The Madhesis, they felt betrayed, and they said that they are not being incorporated in the new constitution of 2015, and there in the Terai there was terrible protest from different ethnic groups, not only the Madhesis, and as we know, the Madhesis are of Indian origin and they reside in the Terai areas and have close connection with India. Now, India, what it did, it stopped the trucks. Nepal said it is a blockage from India, and it was sometimes dubbed as Nepal blockade. India said it is not possible for India to send trucks full of fuel and medicines and other essential commodities to transport through the disturbed Tarai areas. Nepal must address the political unrest first, and then India will send in the trucks. So if it was 300 trucks per day, it came down to 5 to 10 trucks per day. So it was acute shortage of fuel, acute shortage of medicine and essential commodities in Nepal. So it was alleged that India is doing this because India is behind the Madhesis. Ultimately, this was solved when in 2016 a constitutional when the constitutional amendment was made, India agreed again to return to the status quo. Again, everything was resumed. But the Madhesis, they said that they do not consider the amendment as a complete one. It is incomplete, though it incorporated their demand for proportional representation in the parliament. It did not kind of address their demand for federal restructuring of the country. So their resentment continued, but with India, the relationship could be just put on the track. So you can see that if you are a landlocked country, you cannot fight long. You cannot fight long. You have to surrender to the neighbor who helps you a lot in terms of peace. And at present, we are seeing the same thing, because with the Kalakali issue, Nepal is trying to do armed twisting and playing the Chinese card. India has stopped all supplies, and you would be surprised to hear that Sorse Tel or mustard oil is more than 250 rupees per kg, and noon or salt is more than 100 rupees per kg in Nepal. So you can better understand how people is. So for a landlocked country, it is not so easy to play with a trusted neighbor who has helped you all the way in your infrastructural development, in your hydroelectric power development. It has extended lines of credit to you. I've said the instability of the government and who is in the government also determine whether Nepal would be pro-China and or would be pro-India. And unfortunately, here we have a person who openly does liaison with the Chinese diplomat, and you find that the Chinese diplomat, she is running from this house to that house, and she is trying to get a solution, a way out in the Nepali politics, and this is quite against the diplomatic standards. But unfortunately, this is being encouraged in Nepali politics, which KP Sharma Oli is facing the fire from the other members of the Communist Party. So for Nepal, it is very, Nepal also has to be very careful about how it should cultivate its relation with India and cultivate its relation with China. Who is more important? Can it use the trade route of China and reach out to the ocean, or it is the shortest route from China, from Nepal to the Calcutta port to the Bay of Bengal? Which one is profitable? So it is not that you just play on the China card and raise the nationalism issue and kind of try to stay onto your pussy. So an unstable government is kind of incentive for China to play against India, and as it has been playing in Aksai Chin, in Galwan Valley, Arunachal Pradesh, it did not take a minute for China to play the Nepalese or rather KP Sharma Oli against India. But Nepal again forgets that it has to come back to India, because India has been a trusted neighbor, and it has helped Nepal with a lot of, I'll show you in the next slide, how much of economic assistance in Nepal has received from India. But because you indulge in a kind of playing one neighbor with the other, it when recently in 2015, when India had stopped the trucks to enter into Nepal, or its kind of blockade that was called for, Nepal quickly went to China and tried to get assistance from, or fuel or other credit assistance from China. So Nepal is a very difficult proposition. It is not like Bhutan. It is a difficult proposition for India, because it can switch sides anytime, and it is this stability and instability factor which determines in which sides Nepal would vacillate. And we see, if we look at the timeline of Nepali politics, we would be surprised to see that it took me charts after charts to actually write down the time frame of Nepali politics, starting from the autocratic Rana regime or till today when KP Sharma Oli is in power. So you can, from the beginning, Nepal had been under Tribhuvan Prithvinarayan Shah, under the Shah dynasty. After the Shah dynasty, it had been under the autocratic rule. The Rana or the prime ministers, they had usurped the power, and they became the rulers of Nepal. But after that, anti-Rana movement, which is staged from India, as we find that the Nepali Congress, the communist, some of the communist parties of Nepal, they were all formed in India. They were also involved in the Indian independence movement, and they had fought to the in the anti-Rana movement from India. So India has been there from the beginning with the Nepali politics. So, but what happened after the anti-Rana movement, and then there was this Nepali Congress, it came to power, but never you would find a consistency or a consistent, stable kind of government over here. Because for sometimes the government continued, but again a prime minister, you will find rapid changes in the prime minister. Ultimately, you find the royal coup in 1960 by King Mahendra, where he usurped the power by the royal coup, and a new constitution was introduced, and he introduced a peculiar, a unique kind of democracy called the panchayat system, which was a partyless democracy, and the prime ministers who were put in the position were all the royal loyalists. So it was very different kind of situation. Nepal had experimented with democracy, it's still experimenting with democracy, but never it had a stable kind of government which we can see we had, except for a brief phase where there was Aram Gairam's Sarkar. So it's no kind of history of instability that Nepal has. And when we find that Mahendra, he was a very adventurous king, and he just wanted to come out of the Indian influence. So what he did was that he floated the idea of zone of peace in mid-1970s, when in 1975 Sikkim was annexed by India. Nepal became terrified that India might also capture Nepal as a part of India. So it floated that Nepal should be recognized by the international community as a zone of peace, which India vehemently protested, and the international community, they did not give any fatta. They ignored it. So the plan was stopped. But it was under Mahendra that you have that trade and transit treaty problem also. So, and he also established diplomatic relations without even informing India with Israel and other states. Whereas in the Treaty of 1950, he should have informed India. So it's been a kind of roller coaster ride for Nepal, and from 1960 to 1990, you have this partyless panchayat system. Only in the 1990, when there was this civil resistance movement, that the king was, by the time Mahendra had died, it was King Birendra who was in power, who did just little cosmetic changes to the panchayat system, and he continued with that. It is only 1990 that multi-party democracy and the new constitution was introduced in Nepal. And then elections were held, but again you will find that it's not kind of timeline of Nepali politics. There have been ups and downs. There have been too many prime ministers coming and resigning, coming and resigning. And at the same time, when we look at in 1996, it was the beginning of the Maoist insurgency movement. The Maoist insurgency movement, the prime objective was first, they viewed India as an imperial power. So the 1950 treaty, it must be either scrapped or must be revised. But mainly they were in favor of scrapping the treaty, and they were against too much of foreign direct investment, foreign meaning Indian direct investment in Nepal, India's tremendous influence and presence in Nepal. So prime enemy was India, and they also wanted the abolition of the monarchy and democracy, full-fledged democracy in Nepal. So in one hand, you have a civil war kind of situation in Nepal because of the Maoist insurgency. And on the other hand, you have very weak government of prime ministers coming and going. So around this time in 1990s, you have almost a kind of okay relation with India, not much of China intruding over here. But once the Maoist comes into the scene, they have a pro-Chinese tilt. But at that point of time, they were not in power, so the tilt will come later when they assume the power. So from 1990s till 2000, it was this kind of instability continued along with the Maoist insurgency. 2001, you have the royal massacre, and you have the death of King Birendra with all the other royal members, and King Gyanendra assuming the power as the king of Nepal. The Gyanendra has a history. When we were talking about the anti-Rana movement, before that, the Ranas, they had put the Ranas, they were trying to put the royal members under house arrest, but they escaped and they took refuge in the embassy and they were smuggled into India. Okay, but while they were making their escape, they left a toddler, Gyanendra, in the palace. So Gyanendra was made a figurehead at that point of time, and the Ranas ruled actually in the name of Gyanendra. It is the same Gyanendra who comes back and much older now, and he assumes power of Nepal. And you have gradually what you have, Gyanendra becoming super powerful. He is dismissing the parliament, dissolving the parliament, and he assumed complete power in 2005, and he put his persons of his own choice in the political seats of the prime minister. It was only in 2005 that you have the Maoist insurgents group and all the parties in Nepal, they are coming together. They were coming together and they formed a 7-party alliance, and they formed a 7-party alliance with the Maoist party, the Nepalese Communist Party, and they presented a 12-point agenda and started an all-out movement against Gyanendra. They started an all-out movement against Gyanendra. Gyanendra, at the end, he had to succumb to the public pressure and to the movement, and he said the power will be returned to the public. So he reinstated the old parliament that he had earlier dissolved. And then we find the 7-party and the Communist Party, they put G.P. Koirala as the prime minister, and then they made him abolish monarchy, declare Nepal as a republic state, and another interim constitution was introduced, and Nepal was made a secular state. Earlier, it was a Hindu kingdom. And gradually, as events went on,
you have Prachanda, who assumes power in 2008 after the elections, but he could not continue in power, and it was his 1 year that he was almost in power. But in this 1 year, he proved to India that he is more inclined to China than to India. So it was usually a Nepali Prime Minister pays a visit first to India on his election, first to India and then to China. But this time, Prachanda, he visited China first and then he came down to India, giving a clear indication that we are a mature nation and we can go to China first, then come to India. But he faced a kind of troubled situation when we tried to induct the Maoist insurgents into the Royal Army. And he had a tussle with the president of Nepal and he resigned. So when he resigned, it was in 2009 he resigned, and Madhav Kumar, he became the prime minister. But he also resigned in 2010. He resigned, and Jhalnath Khanal, he becomes the prime minister. So it is very difficult. Even I can't remember who becomes the prime minister and who immediately resigns after 6 months or after 1 year. So it is a very difficult kind of situation. For the internal politics of Nepal is like a khichdi. It is very unstable. So it is we cannot in India, staying in India, we cannot kind of experience what is happening in Nepal. It's a kind of hodgepodge that goes on and on. Then you have a kind of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, he becomes the head of the interim government. Can you even imagine about that? Ultimately, you have the elections to the Constituent Assembly in 2014, and ultimately in 2015, you have the new constitution coming up. But as soon as the new constitution in 2015 comes up, the Madhesis and the other ethnic groups, they find that their demands, as I have talked about when I talked about the blockade by India, or it is sometimes also called as Nepal blockade. So these people, they started protesting. And again, you find that for October 2015 to August 2016, it is KP Sharma Oli who comes to power. He resigns. Again, Prachanda comes to power. And then after the February 2017 elections, again the communist parties, they emerge as the victorious, but it is KP Sharma Oli's party which secures more seats than Prachanda's party. So KP Sharma Oli from 18 onwards, he is in power, and currently the khichdi that is Pakistan in between India and Nepal is his creation. And he might face or might be forced to resign, and then again Prachanda can become the prime minister. So you see that this kind of instability in your internal politics will always prompt you to find a scapegoat outside. So the scapegoat for the Nepali people, not the people, the politicians, is India. Because this terrible anti-India feeling in Nepal, and it is kind of churned by the Nepalese politicians. And whenever there is instability inside, immediately the scapegoat is India. And you find some kind of problem with hydroelectric power problem, or you find a problem with border dispute, you rake up the dispute, and then you bring in China and create trouble for India. So whatever we see now is a kind of fallout or the result of such instability in one country, which is being used to kind of as a eyewash for its own citizens, just to show them or to tie them to by the bonds of nationalism and arousing the nationalism by using anti-Indian rhetorics. So Nepal's India-Nepal relationship is structured by external factors, as well as these internal factors. And after the elections, we find that Prachanda and Oli, they come together and they form the Nepalese Communist Party after the elections only, okay, in May 2018. And it is this coalition that is ruling. And Prachanda and Oli both are the presidents. But now they are at loggerheads. Oli has less number of supporters, Prachanda has more number of supporters. Either there can be two possibilities. Either the party, this coalition, this unified Nepalese Communist Party, they can split, or just now it's in, Oli can declare a state of health emergency. Look at it. He has thought about imposing state of health emergency because of worsening of COVID situation, which will give him time to breathe and won't and he doesn't have to leave or abdicate his position. But the president of Nepal has been silent on such a proposal of state of health emergency. It has to be seen what will happen in the coming days. And as I was telling you, though the 1950 treaty is the bedrock of Indo-Nepal relationship, we have what India has contributed. This is the current 2018 record. And you can see how much India has contributed to the economic development or economic boost that is needed for Nepal. And in
পিউদি মিউটেড হয়ে গেছে, মিউটেড হয়ে গেছো।
Hello.
পিউদি মিউটেড হয়ে গেছে।
Dr. Ghosh, please unmute yourself. You can't?
Dr. Piyush Ghosh, please unmute yourself.
She says. You give a, she can't, she says.
But she, admin
Only
can't.
she can.
Only she can unmute herself.
Only Piyush can
You
unmute herself.
Chat e likhe de the way she can do it.
আমার মনে হয় ফোন করে নেওয়াটা ইজি হবে।
হ্যাঁ ফোন করো।
তাহলে ফোন
তোমার
করে
কাছে
নাও।
নাম্বার, I don't have number.
হ্যাঁ, she could do it.
Yeah.
okay, so
Yeah.
you see the tune of trade between India and Nepal. Of course, the trade India export to India is much more higher to the Nepalese export to India. Whereas I've just given the figures for 2018 when I am considering the trade, the export of India to Nepal. But whereas I'm considering the import from Nepal, I have taken a decade-long picture. I've depicted over here a decade-long picture, which gives that the trade from import from Nepal to export from Nepal to India is not that much, but still for Nepal to thrive, that is also quite a heavy amount. And you can see how much India has given to Nepal, the lines of credit, the credit lines that we have extended. There are 4 credit lines that we have extended to Nepal for its infrastructural development. And you will see that Nepal is stopping the countries that receive grants from India. And hello. So
Arfa Ali, please stop presenting.
So you see the amount of economic transaction that takes place between India and Nepal. And also we have tremendous
potential. Nepal has tremendous hydroelectric power potential for hydroelectric power, and India is trying to forge ahead with hydroelectric projects. The most successful has been the Mahakali Treaty. The others are on their way. Two have been dropped because both the sides could not agree on the how the planning should be, or the how should that project should be executed. But these three are the prime and most important, and the recent one is Arun 3. Arun 3 is a huge mega project, and you will be surprised that the BHEL, the Indian company BHEL, have two important orders, one from Arun 3 and another from the another project in Nepal, and it's quite a huge amount of order that they got. So we have the cooperations, as the previous speakers they have talked about bus cooperation diplomacy, about several kinds of cooperation that we have. Leaving apart that, this is the main, the economic cooperation. Still, what went wrong? What went wrong that we have such a kind of situation where our relation with India, with Nepal, is on a roller coaster ride? It's because India inaugurated the road connecting Dharachula to Lipu Lake. As Rituparna had rightly said, it is the Manav Sarovar route, and once this road has been constructed, it has lessened the time taken for the pilgrimage to Manas Sarovar. But Nepal suddenly, tell me one thing, when India was constructing the road, was Nepal blindfolded? It was not aware that India was constructing the road. Only when the road was virtually inaugurated by Rajnath Singh, that Nepal woke up to surprise and then started protesting that it is its area. Nevertheless, Nepal did not take seconds to think about, but took up this issue of Kalapani and started playing between China and India. It is in the tri-junction of China, Nepal, and India, this Kalapani. As Rituparna had likely said, that the three territories which are being claimed by Nepal are the Lipu Lake, the Kalapani, and Limfjord, which have been showed in the new political map of India released after the J&K State Reorganization Act in 2019. When this was showed in India's new map, suddenly Nepal started its protest, and it came up with its own version of the map where it incorporated these three disputed territories into its territory as a part of that 1816 Treaty of Sangauli. India says that it is a kind of cartographic assertion on the part of Nepal. So, and then starts the brawl between India and Nepal, where China steps up. But actually, if you look at this crisis, it lies in that instability that is present in the Nepali politics, which is being played by China. So it is difficult for India, therefore, to have a neighbor whom you help so much, but at certain point of time, this neighbor becomes a pen in your neck. But you cannot lose your nerves. You have to redefine your foreign policy. You have to identify not Pakistan, not Nepal, not Bhutan, but you have to identify and redefine your foreign policy towards China, because that is the main villain which India is doing now. That
it is redefining its policies, and it is thinking in terms of China. Once you are able to balance off China, you will be able to balance off these neighbors which sometimes create nuisance in your security and strategic calculations. And this is a part of the picture where, as I've told you, that there is a the structural factors lies in the externalities as well as in the internalities of Nepali politics. The externalities obviously is that of China, which has an objective of encircling India and limiting India to South Asia and aspiring to become a regional hegemon with its with its BRIE, with its Maritime Silk Road and string of pearl initiatives. So it will go to any length to satisfy or to fulfill these aspirations, and in that it will use Pakistan, it will use Bangladesh, it will use Nepal, it will again try to threaten Bhutan, and it has done very recently. It has also claimed the Sakteng Wildlife Sanctuary to be falling within the disputed territory of Nepal, of Bhutan and China, because China has a vision of becoming a regional hegemon as well as a global leader, because all this planning is not only limited to South Asia. The string of pearls extends from South China Sea through the Indian Ocean to the Persian Gulf, and in this and also to Port of Sudan in Africa. And the Maritime Silk Road is also from South China Sea to the Persian Gulf. And why these are important? Because these are important sea lines of communications, SLOCS, sea lines of communications of oil, natural gas to Beijing, which has only one side opening to the ocean and the other side is landlocked. So the BRIE and the OBER and the CPEC, they think in terms of connecting from their territory to Central Asia towards Europe, because that is landlocked. So these plans are behind such unrest, which we will find every time coming up in these regions. Indian Ocean, South China Sea, and Asia Pacific. And this is the strategic reality of your current global politics, where Ladakh, Nepal, Bhutan, they are parts of it, bits and pieces of it. This is the reality where you have India, you have China, you have Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Pakistan, Port of Sudan, forming the part of the string of pearls. And also you have the Asia Pacific, which also is an important playground for China, because there Taiwan and Hong Kong are the prime targets of China, and Japan also is a contender in the Asia Pacific, and not to forget about the presence of US, Australia in the Asia Pacific too. Now, India is not included in APEC, but India also has, because it is claimed that India is not a ring state of Pacific Ocean, but nevertheless, at the current scenario, we find that USA, Australia, Japan, they want to involve more India's maritime power in the Asia Pacific too. And so you have naval exercises with Australia, with Japan, with USA. And in the Southeast Asia, where you have the Spratly and the Paracel Islands dispute with China, you at this current situation, you have the Southeast Asian nations. They are also trying to balance out the Chinese influence in the Southeast Asian, South China Sea, where you also find that the USA sends its carrier, 2 aircraft carriers and other fleets into the South China Sea to ensure that the Chinese activity in the South China Sea is balanced off. So in the coming days, the South China Sea, the Asia Pacific, the Indian Ocean, they are really going to be the theaters of global politics. And time and again, you will find Nepal, sometimes Bhutan, sometimes Bangladesh, sometimes Sri Lanka creating trouble for India, because China has a close proximity with India and her neighbors. So China will be troubling this area as well, wherever it has proximity, as well as Asia Pacific, as well as South China Sea and the Indian Ocean, because it suffers from Malacca dilemma. That is, here in the South China Sea, there is a small bottleneck, and India has excellent relations with the Southeast Asian nations. First, it was the Lukist policy, now is the Actist policy. And because the Chinese intrusions into the Spratlys and the Paracel and the South China Sea is not going well with the Southeast Asian nations. So if with any of the Southeast Asian nations, India just closes or blockades a blockade of the Strait of Malacca, then the Chinese vessels won't be able to sail through the Indian Ocean to the Persian Gulf and get the resources or oil supply to the mainland China. So it suffers from the Malacca dilemma, which again kinds of creates too much of Chinese activities in the Asia Pacific as well as in the South China Sea, in the Indian Ocean. So in the upcoming days, the global politics, as we will see, because of the COVID-19, the entire world is accusing China for being the super spreader of this disease. The more you accuse China, the more it will try to kind of resist such kind of allegations and will try to expand its activities into this region and create disturbance in the global politics. But one good thing which emerged due to the Ladakh crisis is a new coalition of the willing. The new coalition of the willing, where you have USA, where you have Russia coming in, Japan coming in, and along with India, they had balancing of China. So now we have, tomorrow also there is a meeting, because this engagement in the Ladakh, in the Galwan sector has started. But I don't trust the Chinese, but let's see what actually happens. If had not this new coalition of the willing had emerged, China would not have stepped back an inch from where it had intruded. So India-Nepal relation is just a microscopic portion of the huge design that China has set in its conquest, maybe dubbed as its expansionist policy, where it also claims Vladivostok, the Russian city, to be its part, because it is now on the mission to recover whatever the Qing dynasty, Q-I-N-G, Qing dynasty, had lost to the world. So whenever we talk about India-Nepal relationship, the ups and downs, the stability of Nepal is very important, because an unstable Nepal will just give the China the most needed chance to play Nepal against India in its huge scheme of encircling India through its string of pearls, and as well as creating problem for India because it has several expansive schemes. It all wants the Galwan or whatever the strategic finger point areas over there, so that it can construct the Brai, the Sipek through it without any objection. So it is to look at Indo-Nepal relations plain and simple is a folly for a student of international relations, because every bilateral relations, there are layers, and especially when we talk about India and Nepal, we have to look into the relationship from the context of the presence or existence of China and its scheme of expansion and dream or vision of becoming the regional hegemon and also an important power in global politics. Thank you so much. I hope you understood well, and I could get through your I guess I could get to your understanding of Indo-Nepal relations and the nuances of Indo-Nepal relations.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank
Yes.
you, Dr. Ghosh. It was an excellent presentation. It was extremely informative and lucid, and I'm sure our participants have benefited much by the detailed way in which you have explained not only the India-Nepal dynamics, but the entire taken the entire perspective, the India-China-Nepal perspective, and you've explained it so lucidly. I would now request our interaction moderator, Dr. Pema Lama, to take over from here. I'm sure she has a handful of questions ready after such an interesting session. Dr. Pema Lama, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Madhuparna, madam. Good evening, Dr. Ghosh, ma'am. Greetings from Darjeeling. I am from Darjeeling. Ma'am, we are very honored to have you amongst us and very much enlightened by a very insightful, out of the box and very, very creative and very, very hands-on session, ma'am. Thank you so much for that, ma'am. So, ma'am, I'm very much privileged to place a few questions on behalf of the participants, ma'am. So, I have a few. So, our Vice Principal, sir, Bera, sir, wants to know, ma'am, why China is trying to increase the boundary.
I told you, because of the Sipek drive and over it, they want a very clear access. So that once they capture the strategic point, they don't have to ask for permission for India, or they don't have to rope in India into the drive. They can just straightly construct the Sipek drive and over.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, we have another question.
Yes.
That is from Durdanta Naskar. He is saying, recently Chinese Navy sank Vietnamese ship and USA was silent. So now is China started building a polar Silk route as alternative to Malacca Strait?
Somebody is talking, I can't hear you.
Yes, ma'am. Even me, I cannot hear you. I'm not able to get you across. There are some disturbance. If anybody has unmute themselves, kindly mute themselves. I'm not able to get the message across to madam. Now, ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, this is from Duranto Naskar. he says that recently Chinese Navy sank Vietnamese ship and USA was silent regarding this. So is China building Polar Silk Route as alternative to Malacca Strait?
What safe route?
Is China building Polar Silk
Yes.
Route as alternative to the Malacca Strait?
Yes, they will always try to seek an alternative because I told you Malacca, the Strait of Malacca can be blocked by India and the Southeast Asian nations. So they will always try to diverge that. But again, given the COVID situation and the lessons that they have learned due to this new emerging alliance of the willing, they have to let's see what how they chart out their foreign policy orientations in all directions, because they're spreading their tentacles in all ways. And obviously, as India, in response to the Gwadar port, China will always try to go for another kind of alternative route so that this Malacca dilemma can be avoided.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, I also have a question for you. Ma'am, seeing the present Indo-Nepal relationship, will this impact the hundreds of migrants that we have in India? I mean, across India, we have a lot of Nepalese migrant. So will this, the present situation impact the migrants who are already settled in the various parts of our country?
In our country, also in Nepal, also there are the Indians who are residing over there in India. They are also residing. So I must say, intentionally I didn't say this thing because these are certain things which I wanted people to raise. Because you are from Darjeeling, you know it's a roti beti ka sampark we have.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
with Nepal. So ultimately, at the end of the day, the way we are intertwined with Nepal, really not so easy to shrug off the relationship, the historical ties with the Buddhism, Lumbini, the birthplace of Buddha, the Gorkha regiment that we have. It is very difficult. We have a very close relation with Nepal. There will be ups and downs. So it is pertinent for the Indian government to restructuralize the Indo-Nepal relationship, keeping the reality of China in mind, and Nepal on its part should seek to have a more stable democracy. These issues of migrants won't be so difficult to work out between these two countries. This is Madhesis, this problem is there because these people come and go from India, from Bihar, from different parts of India, and they're working over there, they have their businesses over there, and they're not being represented, they say. And the citizenship earlier in 1950 it was easier, but later in 1962 many clauses were added to it, and 2015 there's no place for the Madhesis and the other ethnic groups. So these things need to be considered. Then there is a lot of smuggling, cross-border smuggling, human trafficking. And one thing I didn't mention is that between India, Nepal and Bhutan, there is this problem of Bhutanese refugees, which I have worked upon. And I've gone to Nepal, to Jhapa and Morang, where they have this UNHCR administered refugee camps. And this relationship, in this triangular relationship, India has been ekdam silent when it comes, because these Bhutanese refugees, they are Lord Shampas, they're of Nepalese origin, they used to reside in southern Bhutan. They have been totally evicted from Bhutan, and now they use Jalpaiguri, that small corridor, and they went. Some of them they are staying in Darjeeling, and most of them they have gone over to Nepal. So India is very calculative. It treats this matter as bilateral between Nepal and Bhutan, and it's in 1990s that this problem started, but it's still continuing. And it was the best administered camp internationally when I went, and it's now the worst.
Lot of people have been resettled in third countries, but this refugee crisis that exists between these three countries, it has been totally kept as everybody is silent about this. Bhutan is silent and it's not going to take back the Lord Trump pass. India is silent because of this Chinese dilemma, and Nepal is hosting them for years. So it is, international relations is very difficult. So to understand or give a straight line answer, every country, it weighs its options. And as we know, Morgenthau has said that the national interest comes first. So every country will take a case by case approach, and then they will weigh its whether it's pertinent for its or it's compatible with its national interest, and then they will go forward. So this refugee issue has silenced. The migrant issue might come up, but again, diplomacy is the best way, and you have to sit down on the table and work out some tenable solutions regarding the migrants.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. It was a very insightful answer that I got from you. Ma'am, this is the last question for today's session, again from our Vice Principal, sir. He says that, ma'am, since China has already invested so much in Sri Lanka, almost purchased Sri Lanka, I guess. So he says that, do you think Nepal is trying to capture Nepal through the huge investment?
It's the same thing, it's neo-colonialism. And very trickily, creating the Hambantota port, it has invested a huge amount of money. The port is useless. It is not generating any kind of profit, but to service the amount of money that service means paying the interest, it's breaking for Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka is just now in a debt trap that has been created by China, and India has taken this into consideration, and India is trying to regain the lost ground in it. The same thing. Nepal around India and in the Middle India to South Asia, and I rise as a regional.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for patiently answering all our questions. Over to Dr. Madhuparna, madam, please. Madhuparna, madam.
Madhuparna, please unmute yourself.
Hello. Thank you, Dr. Pema Lama. Thank you for such an interesting interaction session. I would now request Dr. Somdatta Banerjee to propose the vote of thanks. Dr. Banerjee.
On the behalf of the Department of Political Science of both Nivalipur College and Kishore Bharati Bhogini Nivedita College, I express my heartfelt gratitude to our distinguished speaker, Dr. Piyu Ghosh, our very own PUD, for her enthralling presentation. The topic of India-Nepal during the pandemic times became interesting and opened up new vistas of studies, not only for the students, but also for us. I would take this opportunity to thank our principal, sir, Dr. Joydeep Sharongi, for his unstinted support, encouragement. I would also like to thank the principal of Kishore Bharati College, Dr. Shiv Shankar Sana, for readily accepting our proposal and supporting us in this endeavor. I would extend my gratefulness to our Vice Principal, Sir, Professor Dibesh Bera, who is there to help us and motivate us always through our thick and thin. Thank you, sir. I'm also thankful to the Nivalipur College administration for extending logistic support as and when required. Special thanks are in order for Professor Anuruddha Kaur, Assistant Professor, Department of Sanskrit, Nivalipur College, to help us with the poster for this lecture session. I'm immensely indebted to the entire faculty of Department of Political Science, Kishore Bharati Bhogini Nivedita College, for extending their mutual cooperation and making this joint venture a fruitful one. Now I would like to thank all the participants who could make it today. Some of them are my colleagues, my seniors, my friends, research scholars and students from different universities all across the country. I want to appreciate my dear students from both the colleges who have enthusiastically participated to make this program a grand success. Last but not the least, I want to thank my departmental colleagues. Thank you for everything. I hope we all stay safe and meet soon. And we just end the era of webinars and go back to the classes, doing the seminars, and we bring back smiles which we can be interacted and be seen face to face. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, Dr. Banerjee. I would just like to mention out here that a feedback link has been given in the chat box. All the participants kindly fill up that feedback form. On filling up that feedback form, you will be getting e-certificates. Thank you all the participants. A very good evening and good night at the same time. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.